All right, we are live here with this live edition of the New Warehouse podcast. And today we are going to be talking about FTZs. And what are FTZs? Well, we're going to answer that in case you're not familiar. But we're going to talk about FTZs, which is a foreign trade zone. And we're going to be joined by Jeff Toffel and Melissa Ehrman representing the NAFTZ, and they are all about the FTZs. And we're going to be joined by Katie Tangman as well from Columbia Sportswear, who handles their compliance on the global trade side. And we'll be talking about how she utilizes them and how they do some things at Columbia. And we're also going to specifically talk about how they have come into the spotlight more in this past year, 2025, and what have been some of the catalysts for that. And I think we could probably guess maybe some of the catalysts that there, I think, have been on every supply chain's mind this year. And we're also going to talk about how to leverage them and how they've been an asset or utilized throughout the peak season, which we're currently in, and have just come out of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday madness, the big time for us in the warehousing and logistics side of the industry. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to leverage them and put them into your strategy for 2026. So I think this is something that will be very insightful for everybody tuning in. And if you have any questions along the way, or you have some thoughts on how you use them, or you want to share with us, feel free to drop that in the comments wherever you are watching from, whether that's on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, or our X account. We are everywhere today. So looking forward to this conversation. And Katie, Jeff, and Melissa, thank you so much for joining me. How are all three of you today?
Doing great. We appreciate the invitation. So happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be with you.
Doing great.
Yes, definitely. Happy to get you all on here and happy to talk about this topic. So let's kick it off here. And, FTZ, right? Foreign Trade Zone is what it stands for. But Melissa, tell us exactly what is that? What is a foreign trade zone?
Yeah, so I guess let's just start off with some basics, right? A U.S. foreign trade zone is a designated site within the U.S. that is technically outside of U.S. commerce. So the benefit of that is that companies can import materials. They can bring in also domestically sourced materials. They can store them, assemble them, manufacture goods, and all of that can be done before the goods are actually entered into the actual commerce of the United States. And it's not until the materials leave the foreign trade zone and go into the U.S. commerce that you pay duties, taxes, and fees on those goods. So the opportunity there is that it allows businesses to defer or consolidate their duties and taxes and streamline their customs procedures.
Gotcha. And so obviously a very strategic tool to be able to utilize and try to manage the flow of some of your goods and inventory into the country from a supply chain perspective. So tell us, what would be one of the primary drivers to utilize one, and what kind of companies are utilizing them?
Well, I will start with the second half, that a lot of different kinds of companies. We see utilization of the FTZ program across all industries in the U.S. Some great examples include a lot of your manufacturing, like heavy machinery, automotive, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals. We also see a lot of distribution, both in specialized products like electronics or telecommunications, but then also retail sales, consumer goods. I mean, it really spans the entire spectrum. And one of the biggest reasons to use it, and one of the big reasons they're a hot topic now, is that duty deferral aspect that I was talking about, right? So it's that ability for a company to tie their cash flow better with their duties, taxes, and fees owed. So it's not when you buy the goods and bring them to your facility that you pay those duties, taxes, and fees. It's not until you actually ship them out. So it's closer to your sales cycle and gives you that opportunity to hang on to that cash for as long as you possibly can. So that's one of the primary drivers of utilization of an FTZ.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess I'll open this question up to the whole group here because, obviously this has been a hot topic this year in 2025 with the rise of, all these tariffs and international trade situations going on and people trying to figure out how to navigate that. So tell us, what you've all seen, and maybe Jeff, you want to kick this one off, is, what have you seen just in the market in general this year when it comes to these FTZs?
Well, we've seen unprecedented interest in foreign trade zones the past year. Certainly, anytime the tariffs are in the news like they have been lately, we see an uptick in FTZ interest. And then this year, especially with the unprecedented nature of what we've seen happening, as folks are looking for each and every opportunity to mitigate and deal with some of these changes that we've seen this year. FTZs come up in their Google searches, for example. And then on top of that, as an association, we've had more mass media exposure this year than ever before. So we see that a lot of folks are, yes. And so I know both Melissa and I have been longtime fans of Marketplace as well. So we were both excited to have an opportunity to appear on Marketplace and on all your major networks and all of that. So that too has brought a lot of attention to the foreign trade zone program. And so that has really been driving a lot of interest. Our grantees, and we'll tell you a little bit more as we have our conversation about the role that grantees play in the foreign trade zone world, but they're kind of the front line of the folks that receive those calls, those contacts, if folks are interested in the program. And they're reporting up to 6 times greater interest in the foreign trade zone program this year. So there has definitely been a heightened level of interest, and that is also translated into record membership numbers for the National Association of Foreign Trade Zones. We're significantly up in membership this year as more and more people are discovering this opportunity. It's been around since 1934, but yet people aren't necessarily aware of it. The federal government doesn't necessarily promote it. That's left up to the grantees. But that's really what we think has been driving a lot of that brand new interest this year.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and obviously, I've seen a ton of the conversation, and we've had some of these conversations on the podcast too, and seen a lot of discussion around foreign trade zones and also like bonded warehouses too. So, so maybe clarify for our viewers here, like, what's the difference there?
Let's take a step.
You want me to take that one?
Sure.
They're similar in that they're both administered by Customs and Border Protection. So they're both bonded facilities. That duty deferral aspect that I talked about, where duties, taxes, and fees aren't owed until it goes into commerce, that's true of both environments. But some of the uniqueness about the Foreign Trade Zone program, one, it has unlimited storage time. Bonded facilities, you can only put materials in for 5 years. US FTZs is unlimited. And so, particularly if you're in retail, sometimes you don't know how long it's going to take for that trend to come back around. So having unlimited storage time can be a benefit. Another difference is in location. Bonded warehouses are clustered around a port, and they have to be within the port confines, versus U.S. foreign trade zones near a port, but they can be much further away. So a company like Columbia, for example, can actually activate their own warehouse that they already own and already have merchandise located in, as opposed to having to put their material in a specified warehouse that's been pre-designated. And then the other thing is there's just a lot more flexibility in a foreign trade zone than you can get in a bonded warehouse. If you're a company that both domestically sources and imports, and you commingle your materials, and you tend to, rack your merchandise just based on maybe size or date of arrival, and you have your imports and domestic source material commingled. That's not possible in a bonded warehouse. You have to keep those two separate. And in some cases, bonded warehouses can't accept domestic material at all. So, if you want the kind of flexibility of your current operations in terms of picking, packing, and in your shelving operations, an FTZ is just a lot more flexible than a bonded warehouse is going to be.
Interesting, and that's a great explanation of it. And actually, I didn't realize the I guess, proximity or the distance rules from the port there, and that's very interesting to point out. So so we have Katie here joining us as well, Katie Tangman, who's with Columbia Sportswear and is using FTZs in their supply chain. So Katie, let's hear from you. I mean, tell us a little bit about, I guess, Columbia's supply chain and where these FTZs come into play.
Yeah, so we activated our first foreign trade zone in 2009, and then our second one, and those are both our owned warehouses. So our second one in 2012. Our supply chain, we for those people who don't know us, we produce apparel and footwear. Some equipment. So we're focused on the outdoors and active lifestyle type products. So consumer products, but primarily apparel and footwear, and then some equipment and so on. So all of our goods are manufactured overseas. And so the two foreign trade zones that we operate here are what are considered distribution operations. We don't manufacture or kit in our zones. We bring goods in and then we ship them out, so it's like a regular warehouse operation, except that they're foreign trade zones. We manufacture in about 20 different countries, and primarily the goods that are shipped to the US are sold to the US. So we're a little bit unique from other foreign trade zones. A lot of companies who operate foreign trade zones in the US, export is a big piece of that, because you're also actually able to store those goods in your foreign trade zone here in the US and then export those goods without ever having to have paid duty on those. Other operations here in the US that are not operating in foreign trade zones, if they're exporting, they have the opportunity to file for duty drawback, which is essentially applying for a refund of those duties, but there's a pretty significant administrative burden. And there's usually also a cost associated with that, because most people are working with a third party to file that for them, who takes a percentage off the top of their refund. So there's a great benefit there. But for us, the big benefits are really, it's that duty deferral and the consolidation of the administrative functions. So rather than bringing our goods in and having thousands of customs declarations that need to be filed every year, we're able to consolidate those on a weekly basis, to consolidate what's shipped out of our distribution centers that are zones. We're able to consolidate those onto a single customs entry. And that provides efficiencies both for us and for CBP and electronic systems that are transmitting data back and forth. So that's been a great advantage to us. And, you mentioned peak season. So we kind of think about peak season in two ways. So peak season for us is really the summer, right? Because we're bringing those goods in during the summer months for this peak shipping season. So we usually start in about May, and we really, really hit our peak in July. And then it sort of trickles out through September. The really nice thing about the zones and that duty deferral is, particularly in this environment, we're able to defer those duties until this point in time when we're actually shipping those goods out into the marketplace. And so many other companies that follow the same business model, they're importing their products, they will have already outlaid all of those duties, during those summer months, and will have just been sitting on that inventory until this point in time when we're in peak shipping season. So it's a great advantage to companies who operate in zones.
Yeah, very interesting, and interesting to hear, from you personally, like how you utilize them and have experienced them. I'm curious, since you had them set up already since 2009, I think you said there, was there any strategic change that you had to do this year with all of the tariff things going on and just the different things just unfolding in general around international trade? I mean, was there any change in strategy, or was it just kind of status quo a little bit?
Well, honestly, managing this is fairly status quo for us, because our particular products have always taken very high duty rates. And so we're used to doing a lot of work to manage that. And so, I'd say what's changed more in this particular year is just the fact that we've been having to pivot a lot, as everybody else has, whether you're in a zone or not. We're having to pivot a lot, and make changes and change our models, and then change the data and, and then update the data again and again and again. So it's really been, just more keeping up with the changes than anything else. So I think certainly, there are always concerns about when these things are announced, how are they going to be implemented, right? Because that's always a question, and the implementation could impact, the way we're doing things. But so far it's been pretty close to what we've seen and what we were already seeing in 2018 with some of those new tariffs that were implemented. And so I think we're managing it in the same way.
Yeah,
I will say
interesting.
that, just to build on what Katie said, we've definitely been hearing from our members. Again, many of our members are already in a foreign trade zone, but some of them are just investigating the opportunity. Sometimes they join to learn about the FTZ program to see if they want to get into it. And one of the things we've been hearing is these changes are coming so fast. And a lot of times it's material that maybe is already on the water. You purchased it 3, 4, 12 months ago. It was pre-scheduled. And now all of a sudden there's this new tariff on it, and you're kind of thinking, now what do I do? And so a lot of our members are saying it's just nice to have that FTZ to park the material, if you will, to kind of figure out, like, to just have a chance to breathe and figure out, what do you want to do? How are you going to report it? Some of these new tariffs are requiring a whole lot more product information than folks have needed in the past. I'm thinking of the steel and aluminum derivatives, where now suddenly you need to know what percentage of your material is steel and aluminum from something that you've just been purchasing, a cup of yogurt, and you've never paid attention to how much aluminum is in the lid on the yogurt. And now all of a sudden you have to go try to get from your supplier, like, how much of the value is this? These kinds of time consuming tasks, at least if you have an FTZ, you can put the material in, like I said, take a breath, take the time to do the research that you need before you have to make entry. And just having that kind of buffer space has been a benefit, I think, in this, such a rapid changing environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you scared me there for a second. I thought you were going to tell me yogurt is made with aluminum.
Well, when I saw it on the derivatives list, I had a little bit of impact too. But no,
you did a double take, right? So I mean, it's very interesting to see, and I think that that's what I've heard too in my discussions is the kind of just constant changing, right, and shifting and where is it actually going to be has been the hardest thing to navigate. It seems like companies are like, okay, well, if this is the number, like, then we'll figure out how to operate with this number. But then they're like, well, a month later it's a different number. Like, how do we deal with that? So I'm curious, Katie, from your side, where the countries you manufacture and where it's coming from, like, if these tariffs are changing, I mean, is there certain windows where this year you saw that, like, the tariff is lower for this country now, like, let's pull the inventory out now to take advantage of that, or how do you do
we
that?
absolutely did that. I mean, we actually had some shipments that we just held, and then the tariffs dropped, and then we shipped them quickly. Sure. And then we had some that we expedited because we knew the tariffs were coming at a certain date. And early on, there were exclusions based on the on-board date, based on when your goods were loaded on a vessel. There were some exclusions. And so some of those things we tried to expedite to get them on a vessel so that they fell within that exclusion window. So there's been a lot of partnering. My particular department, we're focused on global customs and trade. We report up to the legal division. We're not logistics, but we partner with logistics and supply chain. And we were married at that point. Like, our teams were having daily conversations and running reports and looking at what was where and what was on the water, and just, managing it to that level to try to help mitigate the tariff impact.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting because I could see where it's like, oh, the tariff is dropped for this set of inventory. Like, hurry up, let's let's move it. Let's try and take advantage of that and
Yeah.
figure that out. And
Yeah.
are you seeing like similar from your member companies, Jeff and Melissa? Like, are you seeing similar like, okay, the tariff is dropped for this country, so let's hurry up and move and try and take advantage.
We've heard stories like Katie was sharing, certainly across the board. We're actually here at the end of the year now surveying our members that use the FTZ program, and some of our early results are pointing to that duty deferral benefit as being the most used and most popular benefit within the foreign trade zone this year. And then Katie also mentioned those efficiencies with weekly entry. She was talking about earlier, that's coming in at the second most popular use of the foreign trade zone program this year. And Melissa, I know you talked to a lot more of our members in terms of in depth of what they're doing. Are you hearing likewise?
Yeah, and I think in addition, some companies are changing their models. Like, they're making decisions to export material that they had in their warehouses that maybe they had planned to put it in for you to service the U.S. market, and they're deciding not to do that because of the tariff that'll be owed when they ship it out. Another sort of a little known fact about the FTZ program is that if you destroy material inside the FTZ, it is also duty free. Mm-hmm. And I have heard of members that are choosing, for some inventory, it's just not worth it. Maybe they've got on hand merchandise that,
Really?
that they're going to end up paying a lot of duty. And again, if it's an overstock or if it's, really old material and it's been sitting in your warehouse and you're kind of hoping to take advantage of it some time down the road. Some people are just deciding, let's go ahead and scrap it or export it. And then that same scrap ability, if you're a manufacturer and you use a product, let's say like steel and aluminum, and there's a lot of cutting involved, there's a lot of scrap inherent in distributing that material. We're seeing new folks want to come into the FTZ program so that they can take advantage of that scrap benefit. So at least the shavings and things that end up on the floor, they're not paying tariff on, since there's now such a high tariff on everything that they're bringing in. So we're finding some creative uses like that, just to help companies deal with the environment that they find themselves in.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So essentially, if they scrap it or destroy the product within the FTZ, they avoid this duty as well,
right?
And then they can just dispose of the scrap freely, or
Yep. Yeah. And a couple of things can happen, right? It might be something where you are truly completely destroying it, crushing it, cutting it, burning it if you have an incinerator, right? Or you, like my scrap and aluminum example, you may have some sort of pennies on the pound recycling opportunity. And in that case, you can actually pay duty on that lower value of the scrap material if there's some sort of recovery opportunity with it. But it's still better than paying full tariff, on the product that you're really not getting the value out of.
Yeah.
Another opportunity for scrap is, we've had product that's come in damaged before. So what if you've got a hole in your container and you get wet product and it comes in, it's moldy. You can't sell it. It's at a point where you can't clean it. You can destroy that in your zone, scrap it, and then never have to pay the duty on it. So, it does require, you're under customs supervision. So it does require permission from customs. They want to know in advance that you're planning on doing this. They want to see evidence that you've done it or actually be there to witness it. But you can do that. And that it saves you the trouble of having to file drawback after the fact if you want to do that, or not ever pay duty. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've had that in my career too, where there's been a hole in the container, and I'll say, like, when that product comes off, it stinks. It smells so bad.
Literally.
It literally stinks. Yeah. And I remember we tucked that product way in the back corner of the warehouse because we had to wait for somebody to come and inspect it to try and like do the claim and everything. And we would just tell people, just don't go back in that corner. It smells. Very interesting there, and very interesting kind of nuance there as well. I was not aware of that. So Katie, you mentioned a little bit about, your peak season is essentially in the summer, loading up inventory for like this time of year, right? Having it ready. So, within that strategy, and as people plan around, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the holidays, which we have coming up here too as well in this month, how does you leveraging kind of the FTZ come into play there, and how do you kind of align that to make sure that the timing of extracting that inventory from the FTZ is going to align well?
Well, it's really fully automated. So
Okay.
the FTZ portion of that shipping out peak season is really just recognizing those shipments from the distribution center and reporting them to customs. So I wouldn't say that it's that the foreign trade zone actually facilitates the shipping, unless you're exporting, I would say, but not really facilitating the shipment of those goods out into commerce, except for the fact that you're really not paying that duty until the point in time when you're shipping them. And then, it is, to get very much in the weeds for you here, it is, you talk about the systems.
Sure.
The FTZ record keeping system is a unique system that's customs facing. In other words, you typically contain data elements in that. It's an inventory system of record, but you would have additional data that's pertinent for customs in that system. But really, that's always linked either to your WMS or to your ERP. And so you're getting those inventory transactions essentially live, right? And so it's really just most FTZs are highly automated, and so it's really just an integration between those systems that's sending those transactions down to your FTZ inventory record keeping system, from which you then report to customs.
Got it. Okay, very interesting. And then from you kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but from like a inventory perspective, right? If you have inventory, because Colombia, right? I mean, you sell, multiple types of the same SKU, right? Whether it's jackets or shirts or whatever, shoes. And I imagine that you have batches of inventory that is similar that comes in at different times of the year, right? So, normally, right, like apparel and things like that doesn't really have like a best use by date or an expiration date, right? But I imagine like with the shifting kind of tariffs right now, like you're having to manage that date a little more, right? Am I correct in thinking that?
Not really, because the
Okay.
way our zone is set up, we've chosen
Sure.
to have a FIFO inventory method, which is first in, first out, and that's
Yes,
the
okay.
data, right? Not the physical product. We have a random put away in our warehouse, and so as we're decrementing that inventory and shipping goods out, the FTZ inventory record keeping system is really only recognizing the very oldest receipt layer that we had. So if we still had a layer back there that was from 3 years ago, because this is a style that we have year over year over year over year, and we still had a couple in inventory from 3 years ago, that's what's going to show first.
First, okay.
Even if it was the one that we received a month ago that's actually physically shipping out, right? I mean, that's, and so you actually sort of establish these standards at the time you set up your zone, and you come to an agreement with customs as to how you're going to operate your zone, and they approve you based on those agreements. So there are certain industries or certain companies that may have a lot inventory system that's pretty unusual, and it's usually very unique to a specific industry. And I think that's mostly because it's a lot more costly to operate based on a lot system, right? So so it really depends on the industry you're in and what your agreement with customs was when you set the zone up. And
Got it. Okay. Interesting. And
I was going to just say, kind of related to peak season, it makes me think, I mean, clearly Colombia has their demand planning like to a T and got it all
Mm.
automated. Some of our members, they may have varying demand or not be able to, plan exactly in the same way. And they use an aspect of the program called direct delivery. So this is a specialized privilege that you get from CBP. Katie was talking earlier, when you activate your area, you go through a process with Customs and Border Protection, and you get all these different approvals, and you tell them how you're going to manage your inventory. One of the things you can ask for is what's called direct delivery. If you have repetitive merchandise that is known to you that comes in over and over, what this means is when your material lands at the port, it is automatically delivered to your FTZ in bond, but you can move it prior to making entry. And so let's say it's peak season and you're trying to hurry up and we underestimated and we need to get a shipment in fast. Direct delivery allows you to make sure that that you're going to get out of the port to your facility and be able to just put that product into distribution. And then you go back and report to CBP after the fact. So a lot of companies use that just for supply chain velocity when you're in kind of, a less predictable pattern and you're dealing with, you get the unexpected the prized toy for the Christmas season, right? And, who knows what that's going to be. But if it turns out to be yours, you can get it moved out of the port faster and have a more guaranteed supply chain flow with an FTZ.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting to hear kind of the different ways to strategize around using the FTZ and how to leverage them within your supply chain and ultimately deliver to your customer the best experience possible. So I'm curious, like, what goes into getting an FTZ? I mean, Katie, you went through it. Maybe Melissa and Jeff, you want to tell us some of the kind of the basics and what are the steps to actually get an FTZ?
Well, what I'll start off with is you've heard, first of all, a lot of the different benefits and the different ways that you can use an FTZ. So when an organization is investigating that opportunity, we highly recommend that an organization work with an experienced consultant that is familiar with working with Treasury, Customs, Commerce, the Foreign Trade Zone Board, all the different entities that are involved in overseeing the Foreign Trade Zone program. There's a lot of nuances to it. The devil is in the details. And so these consultants can really help you do a thorough evaluation of the opportunity and make sure that it's the best fit for your business. And one of the things that we've done as an association is if you go to our website and our homepage, NAFTZ.org, we have what we call our FTZ marketplace. And that's a place where you can look around for some consultants and other folks that provide services and support to the FTZ users and the grantees without being a member. So it's a great way to find some resources that can help you understand the FTZ program and the opportunity, and also some folks that can help you through it. And I'll let Melissa and Katie tag in with some more information on that question of getting started and investigating.
Sure.
Yeah, so if you've gone through your evaluation process and you decide, yes, I want to activate my warehouse or activate my manufacturing site, it's a two-step process. We talked about grantees earlier. So the first step is to contact your local grantee, which is the economic development entity in your area that has a grant of authority to designate your site.
Okay.
So this is typically maybe a port authority, or it might be like an economic development entity in your area for your city. Sometimes they're associated with an airport. So those grants of authority can be found on the Foreign Trade Zone Board website. If you need help finding out who is your local grantee, they're all listed out there. It's public information. They operate as a public utility, and they help you with an application to what's called the Foreign Trade Zone Board to get your own designation. And that Foreign Trade Zone Board is made up of the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury. So that's why Jeff was mentioning that you'll interact with those agencies to get what's called your grant of authority, permission to make your site a designated FTZ. Once you get that authority, then you go to Customs and Border Protection, and they will go through a review process. They'll be looking for things like security of your warehouse, inventory control. Katie's mentioned earlier, you have to explain to them how you manage your inventory, how your systems, what kind of visibility you have to your receipts and shipments and that kind of thing. They'll look for their your site areas, proper signage, lots of different things. Make sure that you have all your procedures in place. And then they will officially activate you as a foreign trade zone site. Once you get that activation, that's when you can start bringing in foreign product into that site. And then if you want to do manufacturing, if you are going to bring in components and create a finished good, then you also have to go back to the Foreign Trade Zone Board and get what's called a production authority. It's permission to do that activity on your site. And that's an extra step if you're doing manufacturing.
Got it. Okay. And how long is the process typically?
It depends. It is shorter for yeah, right. That's always the answer. It's shorter for the warehousing operations, right? Because the production requires that second step. And it can be the process with the Foreign Trade Zone Board can take a couple of months. The activation with CBP frequently relies on, how quickly you can get your procedures in place and, make sure that your systems are up to par and can do all of the activities that the Foreign Trade Zone requires. And, sometimes depending on your commodity, there might be extra security procedures that CBP wants you to put in place, fencing or gating, or if you don't have good flow of who comes in and out of your warehouse, they'll have questions about that. So it might take you a little extra time if your security procedures aren't up to par for the FTZ regulations. So that part tends to just vary on the site.
Gotcha. Okay. And Katie, what about from your perspective? Because you went through this, right? So
yeah, I mean, I would just add the value of, again, to tack onto what Jeff said, the value of pulling in a consultant. And the reason for that is it's a unique program where you need people that understand customs compliance, customs regulations, how to communicate with customs, and what it is customs really needs to know from you. And you need people who understand inventory.
Yeah.
And then you need somebody in the middle who can translate inventory into customs requirements. And so most companies don't often start out with that sort of combined knowledge set. And a consultant can kind of guide you towards pulling those two different kinds of understanding together, understanding then how to map your systems, because generally, unless you're a very, very small volume company, you're really going to need to rely on systems for this. They can help you pull that together and then sort of interpret this physical move in the warehouse. It matters a lot. I'll just say, let's say it's a location move within your warehouse. That matters a lot to the warehouse, right? Doesn't matter to customs. There's no revenue, associated with moving, something from one rack to another in your warehouse. So, but shipping something off-site, that matters a lot to customs, right? Because then the duty or the revenue is at stake, and they're there to protect that. So that would be my plug for pulling in a consultant, unless you can really sort of think about developing those skills in-house by pulling those functions very closely together. But it's a new thought process for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think that's great advice to bring in the consultant, because it's not like you're not, going for an FTZ every day, right? So it's kind of like a new thing, right, or an infrequent thing for most companies, I imagine. And I'm curious in there. So Katie, you mentioned that, Colombia, you have your own operations, you do your own distribution, right? You have your own FTZ. And I'm curious, I guess this is a question for the group here. I mean, for an organization, right? What do you recommend, or where do you see them making the decision to maybe go with like a 3PL that has an FTZ set up, or set up their own FTZ with their own facility?
I'll jump in first and just say we get a lot of questions about that. And we're definitely seeing a growing trend of using a third-party operator if you're in a distribution environment, right? And even actually, we're seeing maybe even more if you're outsourcing kitting, some basic repair or refurbish operations, or creation of kitting and that kind of thing. starting to see more folks, rather than activating their own sites, trying to use a third-party warehouse or a third-party operator to do that activity for them in a pre-activated an FTZ. And the advantage there being, so in some cases they're doing it as a temporary measure while they go through their own process of activating their own site. So it's a way to get into the program, get started, get some of the duty deferral benefits that are really key right now in particular while you're working on your own warehouse. And then others are just, it's a chance to kind of try out using the program in general, right? They may not necessarily want to activate their own website or their own FTZ site. But, maybe they've got some really high value material, or they're changing sourcing, right? And so right now, while you're in a higher duty sourcing location, you might put it in an FTZ while you're trying to transition to other options, things like that. And so we are seeing both more people asking us what are some third-party operators out there. We actually have a listing on our website of third-party facilities that are already activated as an FTZ that have space available. Mm-hmm. And then, so they're looking at that. And we're also looking at warehouse operators looking to be that third-party operator for other companies.
Like Melissa said, we see that as a very quickly growing part of the FTZ community. In fact, I had one of our member grantees tell me that in 2025 alone, they've had 10 new 3PLs activating FTZs just within this mid-sized city in Georgia. And so it is a quickly growing portion of the FTZ opportunity.
We saw some of that, with COVID, where a lot of companies had inventory headed to the U.S. and suddenly all the retail operations are shut down, so they don't know what they're going to do with that inventory. We definitely saw a lot of people looking for storage options in FTZs while the whole world figured out when would we be back to our regular shopping patterns. Yeah. So it was interesting. So we started seeing it then, and now definitely the current tariff environment has increased that for sure.
Yeah. I think in addition to what we call the tariff environment, there's been another really significant change this year, and that is the removal of what we call the de minimis provision. Right? And so what happened, both with the explosion of e-commerce and then with the significantly higher dollar threshold that was implemented in 2016, for de minimis, and for the people who aren't familiar with that, de minimis refers to a provision where any goods coming into the U.S. imported, being delivered to one person on one day with a value of less than $800 came in free of duties, taxes, and fees. Mm-hmm. A lot of companies moved their e-commerce distribution operations offshore to Canada, Mexico, and or were just fulfilling e-commerce from offshore from their origin points. We saw a huge explosion in that. That was a big driver of the explosion of de minimis.
Sure.
But companies, really the duty savings associated with that was worth the cost of moving the operations and the individual shipments coming into the U.S. Well, now that provision has gone away, it's more economical for companies to bring those goods in bulk and then store them in a foreign trade zone without having to pay those duties, and then only paying those duties as they're shipping out. So I also think that's a big part of the growth of the 3PL services right now for that, is I think we're starting to see some movement back onshore because the benefit of being offshore for that is no longer there. And there's actually a greater benefit to be here in a zone and defer that duty.
Yeah, you can be closer to your market, but you still get the benefit of hanging on to duties, taxes, and fees until you make the sale. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've certainly seen the push to where more foreign brands and stuff are looking for to be in the U.S. versus like trying to just ship from Europe or directly from Asia or Canada or Mexico, as you mentioned, and it's been interesting to see that shift. So now we talked a lot about kind of what happened this year, right, and things that are going on. So we're getting close to the end of the year. So of course we gotta talk about what's coming next year, right? So I'm curious, maybe Katie, from your perspective, like as Columbia, how are you looking at 2026, and what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that like it's going to level set a little bit compared to 2025, or what's your feeling?
I really don't. I feel like I think the environment we're in now is going to continue. I mean, I think we saw it coming at a much faster pace, right, in the first part of this year. And it's the distance between changes has spread out just a little bit now, but I expect to continue seeing that. I mean, we've got these trade agreements that are continuing to be negotiated with all these different countries. So they may be at one tariff level now, and then next month they may be at a different tariff level. The Supreme Court could decide in the IEEPA tariff case that those tariffs were illegal, and those tariffs may go away. Mm-hmm. But we're sure the administration will then find another provision to create new tariffs under. And so I think what we're going to continue to see into 2026 is what we saw in 2025. We're going to be seeing a lot of change. We're going to see a lot of unpredictability in our costs, and we're just going to have to continue to manage the chaos like we have this year.
Okay, all right. And Jeff and Melissa, what are you seeing from all your members?
Well, I can tell you from the association point of view. I'll let Melissa talk a little bit about the member side. Sure. For the association, we're certainly going to continue to serve our members in terms of navigating these changes. One of the things we did early in 2025 was establish what we called our trade and tariff rapid response team. And our commitment to our membership was that every time an executive order or some new change came out, that this team of seasoned FTZ professionals would review that, analyze that announcement, and then we would communicate to our membership, how does this play in the FTZ space, and what are the considerations our members should be thinking about in light of those announcements and those changes. Also, with so many folks coming into the FTZ program, one of the things that we also do is educate members about the program, especially new folks that are going to administer a zone. We highly recommend that they participate in our fundamentals of FTZs course. This year, we're going to be offering it around the country under a new format, more of a training format. If you want to go to Hawaii, end of January, great reason to get the company to pay for you to go to Hawaii. Melissa will be one of the instructors.
I want to go to Hawaii at the end of January.
Evan, I think you should go. I mean, talk to your boss and see if they'll authorize the expenses.
We can dig in all kinds of details on FTZs.
Yeah, absolutely. So continuing to support our membership and those that are in the FTZ program is going to just be our number one priority as an association in 2026.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have those resources. So Melissa, what are you hearing from the membership on what are they thinking about the next year?
Yeah, so in my role as director of advocacy for the association, I hear both from our members, but I also take their concerns to their members of Congress, right? So from both perspectives. Okay. I agree with Katie. I think, I'm often asked, will we go back to the way things were in 2024? I don't think so. I don't think things will look the exact same next year as they did this year, but we're not going to go back to the same environment that we had pre-trade remedy tariffs this year. So like Katie mentioned, there's some court cases out there that we're watching. There's definitely more of a feeling, I think, that the tariffs are having an impact, but there's still also very much a feeling in DC that this is an effective tool to level our trade imbalances and to change sourcing practices in the U.S. And so they're going to continue, the administration and Congress are going to continue looking for tools to continue that path, I think. And for us as U.S. importers, like Katie said, we're going to have to keep looking for tools to just kind of deal with the changes. And they're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming. I'm hoping that we'll start seeing more details out of a lot of these trade deals, and in some ways that will bring us some more certainty, I think, as we learn more and we start using some of the parameters under these deals, more will become clear. But, and this might be a total random topic for you, but, USMCA is under review next year. Mm-hmm. So here's, something that we've relied on literally for decades. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And I think, depending on which direction that review takes, our industry is going to be under a whole new level of change all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly never uninteresting in supply chain, right? To say the least. Yes. And I'm curious actually for you, Katie, because Melissa, you mentioned in there about, the idea of some of these tariffs and things about, how do we look at where we source from, right? And do we bring more things domestically? And, that's supposed to be a push for that. But I mean, Katie, from your perspective, you mentioned in the beginning that you all import pretty much everything from overseas. Yeah. Have you looked at all? Is Columbia looking at all at manufacturing domestically or no?
Not really. I think particularly in our industry, I mean, there's not a lot of labor here.
Sure.
And there's also not a lot of skill in this particular area, right? These are areas that have really, really developed the skills in other parts of the world, skills and technology. And we just don't have enough of that here, or anywhere close to enough of it here in the US to actually meet the demand for the types of products that we design and have manufactured. So I definitely see that being more of an opportunity for other industries. But not so much for apparel and footwear.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I've heard a lot on the apparel side too. Is like, well, there's just not the industry base here to do that kind of thing. So, thank you for sharing that insight and really great to get you all here on the show today and talk about this. I think it's a very important topic to discuss and to let people know that, this tool is out there for them to use and be able to leverage for their supply chain and try and, as Katie has helped us understand here today from the real world perspective, right? Like how to utilize the FTZ and navigate some of this volatility and tariffs and things that we've seen. And it sounds like we will probably continue to see for a little while here, at least too. So if people are interested in learning more about FTZs or leveraging the association as a resource to do that, or maybe they want to go to Hawaii at the end of January, what's the best way to do that? What's the website?
Yeah, our website is NAFTZ.org, and you can find all that information that we've been talking about. We've got an area on there that's called Is FTZ Right for Me? Kind of idea starter to take a look at, and some of those initial questions that a company can take a look at as they're doing that. And if you think you want to take that next step, like I mentioned earlier, check out our FTZ marketplace on our homepage of our website, and that can lead you to some of those seasoned FTZ consulting experts that are members of the association and can help folks guide their decision and figure that out. Melissa's contact, my information is on the staff section of the website, and we are answering emails all day, every day from folks that are investigating the opportunity. And so we'd love to hear from a bunch of your podcast viewers and listeners as well, Kevin.
All right, fantastic. And I'm sure your email volume has probably picked up this year too, right? I can imagine as well.
Yes, the inbox has been beaten up pretty badly this year, but that's okay. That's what it's there for.
For sure. So appreciate you all joining us. And for Katie's side, for Columbia Sportswear, go to your local retailer and buy some Columbia Sportswear, right? I got some myself, right?
We just dropped our new Star Wars launch this week, so.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. I got to check that out. That's pretty cool. Right. Interesting. So connect with them all on LinkedIn too, if you're watching here on LinkedIn. But if you tuned in late, we also recorded the audio version of this, which will go up on the New Warehouse podcast feed within the next week. And you can watch the replay on all of the channels that you're watching on currently as well. So Melissa, Jeff, and Katie, thank you so much for joining me today and enlightening us about FTZs and how to leverage them. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched and and listened in.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Yeah,
so much.